been dancing around discussing this problem directly in several videos over the years, from my initial discussion of the Warriors website family tree and all of the things it said that were not canon to the books at the time, to the more recent discussion of how information circulates in the series and its fanbase, as an explanation for why so many familial retcons exist. It's been long enough. I think it's finally time to address this issue head-on. Warriors retcons a lot of its relationships. It has always retconned a lot of its relationships. And this creates a variety of problems in the series, depending on how the retcon was handled and how much was said about the characters beforehand. And as such, by and large, in most cases, I really don't like them. However, it's worth saying that I don't hate all relationship retcons. There are cases in which they can be okay, and it mostly has to do with things that were entirely in the background and don't change anything about the story. For instance, Blue Star's Prophecy canonized Mousefur and Runningwind as littermates. Even though this book was written right after Power of Three, years after the original arc was complete, I don't mind this one, because both Mousefur and Runningwind were extremely minor characters in the first arc who were given little to no characterization. Additionally, in the characterization they were given, both were considered young warriors, they shared a couple of patrols together, and Mousefur was there and upset when Runningwind died on patrol with her. Nothing in the first arc implied they were related, but it works, and was applied to characters who didn't have strong identities before. One step above this is retcons made to the first arc within the first arc. There were a lot of elements that were being conceived as the story was being constructed, and in particular, the mates and kits were not established until later in the arc than they reasonably should have been. The first book just has all the queens, seemingly almost all the she-cats in the clan, taking care of the kits, without keeping track of how many kits there were, what genders, names, or appearances they may have had, or who was the mother of each kit. This means that someone like Swiftpaw, for example, could pop into existence as an apprentice in Fire and Ice with no family to speak of, and throughout his short life, we never saw him interact with anyone as if they were a sibling or parent. However, in A Dangerous Path, just as he died and the clan was mourning his body, Fireheart kindly mentions to us that Goldenflower is mourning him especially because she was his mother, and specifically says Swiftpaw was the half-sibling of Bramblekit and Tawnykit. Not only does this mean that Goldenflower and Swiftpaw never once got to interact when he was actually alive, it also says that Goldenflower must have had another mate besides Tigerclaw, paving the way for future and entirely out-of-book retcons later. The Warriors website now lists Patchpelt as Swiftpaw's father, because the wiki said that, because of a statement Vicky made on Facebook a decade ago, but again, nothing is confirmed in the books, and I've already had my talk about cytogenesis. Even just looking at what existed in the first arc, I already didn't like that Goldenflower was declared Swiftpaw's mother only after his entire life had concluded, because it means we still have no idea what their dynamic was like other than, apparently, distant, which makes it very difficult to connect any emotion they want us to think Goldenflower feels about him. Goldenflower herself also has another prominent retcon in the first arc that I rarely see anyone talk about: her mate. Yeah, Goldenflower was only said to be Tigerclaw's mate in Rising Storm, after he had already been exiled from ThunderClan. In fact, Tigerclaw and Goldenflower never share a single conversation anywhere in the series, as Goldenflower as a character barely exists before Tigerclaw is already gone. This bothers me more than Swiftpaw's retcon does, because so much emotional weight is put on the relationship Goldenflower has with her mate and kits. But we have no basis on which to base that weight. We have no idea what their relationship was like, because until it ended, we didn't know that there was a relationship. This is the main problem behind these retcons. Not that they present us with new information, but that they present it too late for that information to mean what it should mean. If you tell me that Goldenflower was Swiftpaw's mother and Tigerclaw's mate all this time, and they just never once interacted or mentioned each other, what you're telling me is that these cats didn't really care about each other and had a very distant relationship. Not that they actually had a deep and emotional relationship that wasn't shown before. That, however, is still the baby step. Because the first arc was so much looser with all of its relationships, be they siblings or parents or mates, when the team went to write prequels with their new standards of community, they had to include relationships for a lot of cats who had no indication of them in the original material. This includes everything from Tigerclaw and Blue Star's entire families, to White Storm being her nephew, something that still does not make sense to me when looking at their mutual and equal relationship in the original arc, and worst of all, Redtail, Willowpelt, and Spottedleaf being littermates. You know, Redtail, the old wise deputy who has been with Blue Star since she first got her lives. Willowpelt, the senior warrior on par with Whitestorm, and Spottedleaf, the explicitly young, pretty, youthful medicine cat. By and large, I do understand why they had to put in some relationships if they had already committed to making prequels. And in that case, I think the ones like Blue Star's and Tigerclaw's families that add context to their characterizations using families that are dead before their actual arc begins work best. There's a clear reason for them to be there. The families are designed to push them in such a way that they end up with the characterization we know, and because all of their family members are gone by the time of the original arc, we don't have to wonder why they didn't interact. However, when you start matching up characters who were in the first arc together, and especially if you don't pay attention to details like their ages or lack of interactions, it can come across as ill-fitting or even inconsistent with the world we learned about in the first arc. Even with prequel retcons, though, I still have some level of sympathy, because while the best option on a family tree level may have been not creating prequels at all, if they had stories they wanted to tell in this era, they had to create some relationships for this time period. And some of them were almost bound to end up feeling forced. At least within the prequels, they can have these siblings, parents and kids, and mates interact with each other so we can grow to enjoy their relationships in those books, even if they don't transfer back to the arc those cats came from. There is a way it could be worse, if you don't consider or include the relationship at all and simply say it in passing, retconning relationships now 15 to 20 years old for the sake of confirming random out-of-book information. This is the category I dislike across the board, whether it's on the Warriors website or in Greystripe's Vow or Blackfoot's Reckoning. The new team has had a trend going for a while where, in any books where they can force it into the allegiances or a single passing statement, they will randomly confirm information like Lionheart being Frostfur's mate, Darkstripe and Greystripe being Willowpelt's kits, or Ravenpaw being the kits of Robinwing and Fuzzypelt, without any further context. These relationships are entirely meaningless, because not only do we have no evidence from them in the arcs or even prequels where these cats featured, but the books they decide to drop this information in will also have no expansion on their relationships. Greystripe may have said Willowpelt was his mom, but they still never talked in his books. He had no feelings about her, and it doesn't factor into his life. Lionheart is apparently Frostfur's mate, and Ravenpaw apparently had parents in Robinwing and Fuzzypelt, but these are facts confirmed randomly in Blackfoot's Reckoning and One Star's Confession. Books that don't even take place in ThunderClan and have no chance of telling us anything about ThunderClan relationships. There's no thought given to what this information actually means for the characters in the story, or how it fits into the world, and there never will be, which makes it useless at best and, as I'll explain later in this video, destructive more often than not. The only purpose these comments serve is confirming things said randomly years ago by an author who themselves was making headcanons off the top of their head, rather than deciding what would make the most sense in the text. This is where we got statements like Longtail and Dustpelt also being sons of Robinwing and Fuzzypelt, and by extension, brothers to Ravenpaw. Sandstorm's parents being Redtail and Brindleface, or, much further back, Willowpelt's mate being her brother Patchpelt, by accident. I have my gripes with all of these headcanons for different reasons, but the basis is the same. There is no evidence for them within the text we actually have of these characters interacting. Sandstorm shows no extra care for Redtail or Brindleface. Willowpelt and Patchpelt did not interact in the first arc even before the prequels made them siblings. And as much as I know a lot of people love it, Dustpelt and Ravenpaw have no close relationship in the first arc. And in fact, Dustpelt's only interactions with him are being mad at Ravenpaw, either for him receiving special treatment from Tigerclaw or for him being a Wynn Clan spy. In our own fan stories, animation, or otherwise, we can make up any relationships we want and give them meaning, emotion, and interactions within our text. But I cannot bring myself to like any of these ideas in the canon of Warriors, because they just do not exist. And, as with Goldenflower's retcons, they do have an effect on how we view the characters. If Sandstorm and Greystripe really did have parents within the clan, it means they didn't care about those parents enough to ever talk to them or care when they died. If Ravenpaw and Dustpelt were siblings, it means they had a distant and occasionally horrible relationship, where neither trusted the other or spent time with them. If Lionheart was Frostfur's mate, or for that matter, if Whitestorm was Brindleface's mate, it means that they were absent fathers and mates who had no interest in their families. These aren't facts the text wants us to take away. They aren't even things the creators want us to take away. They're just natural consequences of making these retconned relationships a reality in a world where these characters never actually interact. This is mostly a problem relegated to the first arc and prequels right off of it, because as the arcs have gone on, we've seen every generation pass and can point exactly to the parents and kits of any cat we need to without the need for retcons. However, even when working under the same circumstances that the first arc had, there is a way where retcons can be acceptable. Put them in clans other than ThunderClan. Much like Mousefur and Running Wind's retcon sibling relationship, these work because the other clans almost never have as much focus as ThunderClan does, especially on the minutiae of their familial relationships. This means that when they wrote Crooked Star and then Tall Star's super editions, they essentially had free reign to design the entire clans with whatever relationships they wanted, and they were able to make those relationships meaningful within the culture and story of the book. This is at least part of the reason why those cats are so beloved, because they had important relationships and interactions to show you what those relationships meant to the cats involved. In the modern days, this hasn't been done nearly as much, partially because the new team doesn't seem interested in giving characters many important or lasting relationships in the first place. But there are plenty of examples of cats appearing and getting relationships in other clans, where it doesn't hurt for them to exist, because we just didn't know anything about their clans or relationships ahead of time, and therefore it doesn't feel as jarring. As a random example, a ShadowClan cat named Snowbird popped into existence as a warrior in The Sight, the first book in Power of Three. Later, Ratscar appeared in the same way in Eclipse, the fourth book of the same arc. We don't know what these cats' pasts were, and barely ever hear from either of them, so even though they appeared in ShadowClan 3 books apart, when Snowbird declares at the end of the next arc, during the battle in The Last Hope, that Ratscar is her littermate, it doesn't disrupt anything. It's just a new piece of information about background characters who didn't previously have any. There are times when even out-of-ThunderClan retcons can be jarring, however, and it mostly comes down to instances where the authors didn't think or research enough about their own characters to understand why certain retcons could be problems. For instance, Blackclaw recently and haphazardly being confirmed as Misty Star's mate, also in response to a Facebook comment turned website family tree thing, rubs me the wrong way, because we saw a lot of Misty Star and it was never with Blackclaw. In fact, he was aggressive to Fireheart and Greystripe when they returned with Mistyfoot's kits. We also have Scorchfur and Snowbird, a pair of ShadowClan cats declared to have been mates in Bramblestar Storm, after Omen of the Stars, where the team didn't realize that Snowbird was in the nursery as a queen in Outcast, before Scorchfur was made a warrior in The Fourth Apprentice. They didn't actually get together when Scorchfur was an apprentice because the concept of their relationship didn't exist until Bramblestar Storm. But looking back retroactively, it doesn't make sense. Aside from that, we have things like Deadfoot and Ashfoot, confirmed to be Crowfeather's parents in his Super Edition without regard for the fact that Deadfoot died in the Blood Clan battle, and Crowpaw couldn't have possibly been born yet based on how the timeline works out. It also makes Deadfoot choosing Crowpaw for the New Prophecy journey look like nepotism. That's still not quite as bad as the other Wingclan things, though, where, after canonizing the Crowfeather parents, One Star's confession decided to make it canon that One Star's siblings were Ashfoot and Morningflower, that he took his former apprentice Whitetail as a mate, and that, together, they had Heathertail, making Breezepelt and Heathertail direct second cousins years after the main series had already made the two mates. Obviously, the team didn't intend to make Heathertail and Breezepelt cousins, give Scorchfur a mate as an apprentice, or give Deadfoot a kit a year after he died. But if you don't pay attention to which relationships, ages, timelines, and otherwise have already been established, then mistakes like this can and will keep occurring. I have, of course, not listed all the relationship retcons that exist in this series by any means, but I hope these ones have given you a sense for the sorts of problems that retcons can cause. Those problems, of course, come in different types and degrees, but it's very rare to find a warrior's relationship retcon that doesn't feel jarring or cause any problems for a character's main material. And the hypothetical benefits they provide to the imagined relationships of characters is hardly ever able to outweigh the issues that come with adding these relationships after the characters and time period in the relationship have left focus. Because well, there is a huge factor in all of these relationships that I have intentionally avoided discussing much until now. The clans have been going on for, at the very least, 22 generations of leaders, and even saying that they ruled only for an average of 3 years, losing 3 lives a year, which has not happened in any arc after the first series, that would be 66 years of clan history, at minimum. In that time, the clans have only rarely welcomed in a stray loner or kitty pet, and have mostly, in the examples we have, avoided mingling with any cats outside of their clans. The clans are also very small. Even in the modern arcs where fewer cats die and the clans are bigger than ever before, the clans have a total of 159 cats. That's large for a book series cast size, but it is tiny for an entire society that only has families within itself. And, of course, this isn't taking into account the fact that, until recently, it was illegal for cats to have mates or kits outside of their clan. Not that that stopped anyone. Basically, the genetic diversity of the clans has to be fairly bad at this point, and if you aren't careful, there are lots of ways to make this problem worse by having cats you forgot are related becoming mates, over and over. The worst of these problems, naturally, exist in ThunderClan, because we have not looked away from their perspective for a single arc since the series started. Other clans more often have cats that pop into existence, like Snowbird and Ratscar did, and many of these cats never receive any parents or siblings. To prove my point, here's a list of all the cats in ThunderClan as of the most recent book. Now, here's the list of all the cats who don't have a confirmed parent in the clans. Now, here are the lists of all the cats in other clans who don't have confirmed parents. There are plenty of good reasons to want more perspectives in other clans and to get out of ThunderClan, but this is certainly one of them. To take it a step further, let's go back to those 4 queens in the first arc that never had established relationships and have had their relationships retconned to the moon and back ever since. Taking into account all information from author statements, the website family tree, and book retcons and prequels and passing statements, here are all of the cats in modern ThunderClan who have the blood of Frostfur, Brindleface, Willowpelt, and Goldenflower, color-coded for convenience. I left out Speckletail because her main mother credits are for Goldenflower and Lionheart, who will already be included in this chart, with Lionheart through Frostfur. And for good measure, here are all the cats who are descended from Firestar or Princess, since Firestar legacy is a big factor to the fans and the authors alike. As you can see, there aren't many cats left without one, or more often multiple, key ancestors, and the ones that do remain either swapped in from another clan or were born as kitty pets. And of those 6, Daisy is the only one so far to have had kits, most of whom died before having kits of their own. For a wider view, this is a family tree for the entire series made by Kibwe that includes every relationship mentioned in the books, by the authors, in the website family tree, and otherwise. It gets very, very tangled, and I've left the link in the description if you'd like to check it out for yourself. Does it make sense now why pairing cats up to be new mates can be so difficult and can cause so many errors if the authors don't pay attention? Or why Twigbranch, Bristlefrost, and Nightheart have all had to look outside ThunderClan to find their mates? There are some cats in even ThunderClan who are separated enough from the genetic cesspool to make good potential mates, but if you don't have this list in front of you... well, I think it's time I mentioned Moonpaw. In the upcoming 9th arc of Warriors, Changing Skies, one of our protagonists is going to be a new apprentice named Moonpaw, who will be the daughter of Thriftier and Bayshine. I won't remark on her character or story until we actually get to read it, but I will discuss the parentage they have given her. As you may be able to notice, both Thriftier and Bayshine have a dense array of ancestry, and when they combine together, Moonpaw will be the first rainbow cat with all 5 ancestors' blood in her system. This is off-putting to fans who actually look into it, and Thriftier and Bayshine are also fully first cousins, which isn't helping. This is one of the more obvious examples to fans who know the characters, but it's more evidence that the team making decisions just does not pay attention to the families of the characters in their books, making it all the more useless that they keep adding relations to the original cast of ThunderClan. But even imagining the 4 queens to be the start is a mistake, because those queens have been tied together by retcons as well, with all of Goldenflower and Lionheart's kits being made cousins by the retcon of them being siblings, some of Brindleface and Willowpelt's kits being siblings by the retcon of Whitestorm being Brindleface's mate, and even more specific examples, like Dustpelt being Ferncloud's uncle, exclusively because of an out-of-book retcon making Dustpelt and Brindleface siblings. In essence, the clans, and ThunderClan in particular, are extremely tangled, and any retcon that is added, in or out of the books, only further complicates that web and makes problems like Moonpaw's parentage harder and harder to avoid. With this, and the fact that the new team has never once put effort into making the retcon relationships mean anything in the cats' lives, I can't see any benefit to making these relationships in the space of the canon world. And I really wish someone would become mates with Stormcloud and Mousewhisker before this whole clan gets swallowed in gene pool colors. Again, if you want to make your own or accept these familial relations for your own projects or headcanons and expand on those in your world, go right ahead. I have nothing against the establishment of relationships in general, far from it. But if there were one thing I could change about the writing of Warriors, it would be stopping retcons from being added to families long gone, ruining the characterizations of those involved and the gene pools of all connected to them. It won't happen. I don't have that power, but it'd sure be nice. Thank you for watching, and always remember to keep track of your own family tree instead of relying on external sources, and for goodness sake, if you include a relationship, make it matter to the characters involved.